The shadows of the Second World War still linger in forgotten archives, in the margins of declassified files, and in the whispered testimonies of soldiers who vanished without trace. Beneath the maps and official histories lies a network of secret missions, erased operations, and technologies that were never meant to be known. From the icebound reaches of Greenland to the subterranean bunkers of Bavaria, and from missing German convoys to unclaimed Soviet permafrost sites, the world was shaped by decisions that were hidden from the public eye. Every document, every recovered artifact hints at a war that never fully ended. A war whose ghosts are only now surfacing in the shadows of history. Chapter 1: Operation Eclipse and the Vanished Convoy. In the waning days of April 1945, as the Third Reich teetered on the edge of collapse, British intelligence intercepted a series of encrypted naval transmissions emanating from Kiel, suggesting the imminent departure of a heavily guarded convoy. The operation was classified under the codename Operation Eclipse, and it would come to be one of the most enigmatic naval mysteries of the Second World War. According to intelligence logs preserved at Bletchley Park, 5 German U-boats, each equipped with advanced sonar-evading technology and reinforced hull plating, were slated to transport critical material to an unknown destination. MI6 reports indicate the cargo included components of a program codenamed Sonnenkraftwerk, or Sun Engine, though the precise nature of these components was heavily redacted in the surviving files. The convoy, meticulously documented in decrypted communications, was tracked as it navigated through the Skagerrak Strait, where Allied forces had established a naval blockade. However, post-war naval logs reveal that only 3 of the submarines, U-2513, U-234, and U-228, were accounted for in South American ports. The remaining 2, U-523 and U-1107, seemingly vanished without a trace. Diver reports from the 1980s indicate the discovery of twisted metal hulls off the Azores, though identifying serial numbers had been deliberately obliterated. The lack of consistent records fueled speculation that the cargo had not been mere equipment, but experimental technology, potentially nuclear or chemical, that the Reich sought to preserve from capture. Soviet intelligence files, declassified in the 1990s, suggest a parallel operation in which the missing U-boats may have rendezvoused with clandestine agents in Argentina. The NKVD reports describe encounters with foreign operatives of exceptional secrecy who arrived with false identities and a mandate to secure the cargo at all costs. Allied intelligence, including post-war CIA internal communications, shows clear evidence of awareness, yet a decision to suppress public knowledge of the operation. Some documents reference meetings in Buenos Aires between high-ranking German officers and officials from the fledgling Argentine government, though these records remain heavily redacted. Eyewitness accounts from former U-boat crew members reveal nights of extraordinary tension as the vessels traversed mine-laden waters and evaded Allied sonar detection. Crew diaries recovered from British and German archives describe the surreal experience of navigating the Atlantic at a time when the war was effectively over, yet every movement was calculated with the precision of live combat operations. According to a partially declassified Kriegsmarine log, the submarines were issued orders to avoid engagement with Allied ships entirely, emphasizing the criticality of the cargo over any standard military objectives. The operational planning behind Eclipse was detailed and meticulous. Cryptographers at Bletchley Park noted unusual encryption patterns that diverged from standard Enigma ciphers, hinting at a compartmentalized network of communications within the German naval hierarchy. Post-war investigations revealed that the operation had been overseen by Admiral Karl Dönitz himself, alongside key officers in the Kriegsmarine's Experimental Weapons Division. A memorandum found in London archives suggests that the Sun engine components were intended for an undisclosed application, possibly linked to propulsion or energy generation, though the technology never reached public scrutiny. Efforts to trace the fate of U-523 and U-1107 intensified decades later. In the 1980s, NATO hydrographic surveys and underwater archaeological missions discovered anomalous wreckage at precise coordinates in the Azores. Forensic analysis of the steel remnants indicated advanced alloys not commonly used in German shipbuilding at the time, corroborating theories that the vessels carried classified equipment. Yet, every dive and excavation was shadowed by intelligence oversight. with divers reporting sudden restrictions and files being recalled or sealed, often citing national security concerns. The broader implications of Operation Eclipse extend beyond the immediate disappearance of 2 submarines. Intelligence assessments from the 1960s suggest that elements of the cargo could have influenced post-war technological developments in multiple nations. Speculation in internal CIA and MI6 analyses posits that components of the Sun engine may have been secretly studied in laboratories in North and South America as part of early Cold War experimentation. Analysts also point to discrepancies in Argentina's post-war industrial advancements, noting abrupt spikes in electrical engineering patents and energy research that coincide with the presumed arrival of German specialists. Eyewitness interviews from former Allied officers involved in monitoring U-boat movements offer further intrigue. Many recount the experience of intercepting signals that hinted at a broader geopolitical maneuvering beyond conventional warfare. One retired Royal Navy intelligence officer described coded messages referencing Project Sunlight, possibly a cover for the Sonnenkraftwerk initiative, which remained a mystery until files were partially declassified in the 1990s. The officer remarked that the disappearance of 2 submarines was considered an embarrassment, yet it was also regarded as a phenomenon requiring ongoing monitoring. The archival trail grows more obscure when examining the post-war fate of Operation Eclipse documentation. Officially, all files were transferred to the National Archives under restricted status, with several documents marked for destruction or permanent sealing. In 1947, a directive from the British Cabinet Office instructed MI6 to maintain Eclipse files under Level 5 sensitivity, effectively removing them from any public or academic review. Correspondence from this period reveals internal debate over the advisability of public disclosure, with some officials fearing that revealing the Sun engine project could destabilize post-war reconstruction efforts in Europe and South America. The mystery is compounded by surviving Kriegsmarine personnel testimony. Letters and memoirs indicate that some officers believed the convoy's cargo was of sufficient strategic importance to justify clandestine relocation, even as Germany's surrender became inevitable. References to interactions with unidentified agents, coded as visitors from the West, appear in multiple personal logs, suggesting a pre-arranged transfer of technological assets to Allied or neutral hands. The exact terms and recipients of these transfers remain unverified, fueling ongoing speculation among historians. In conclusion, Operation Eclipse encapsulates a chapter of WWII that sits at the intersection of naval operations, secret technology, and post-war geopolitical maneuvering. The disappearance of U-523 and U-1107, the partial recovery of wreckage in the Azores, and the suppression of extensive intelligence files all point to a calculated effort to control knowledge of highly sensitive assets. While fragments of the truth have emerged through declassified Soviet and Allied archives, the full scope of Sonnenkraftwerk and its implications for both wartime and post-war history remain shrouded in secrecy. Every recovered document, every eyewitness account, and every redacted file contributes to a narrative that is both tantalizing and elusive. A reminder that even in the age of global warfare, some truths are deliberately buried beneath the waves and the sands of time. Chapter 2. The Ghost Bunker of Königssee. In the dense, mist-shrouded forests of Bavaria, near the small town of Berchtesgaden, a network of subterranean tunnels lay forgotten for decades until their accidental discovery in 1997. Known to locals as simply the Ghost Bunker, the complex bore the official German codename Projekt Morgenröte or Dawn Project. Archival evidence suggests that construction began in early 1944 under the direct supervision of SS engineer Dr. Friedrich Lenz and General Hans Kammler, head of the SS Special Weapons Division. The bunker was designed not as a refuge, but as a site for what contemporary documents describe as biophysiological, endurance research, and advanced weapons, logistics, though the specifics were deliberately obfuscated in surviving files. Early reconnaissance by the US Army in May 1945 failed to locate the structure, likely due to its sophisticated camouflage and the mountainous terrain that concealed entrances beneath layers of debris and forest growth. Eyewitness accounts from villagers describe the arrival of unmarked trucks and convoys at night, well after the official surrender of Germany. Drivers and guards lacking any identifiable insignia unloaded crates containing what survivors described as metal chambers. instrumentation, and large cylindrical tanks. Subsequent investigations by the Bundesarchiv revealed partially redacted orders referencing a continuation of Project Morgenröte and the relocation of experimental materials from Berlin to Berchtesgaden, ostensibly for protection against Allied discovery. Dr. Lenz's personal notebooks, preserved in Soviet archives, detail controlled experiments involving high-altitude oxygen deprivation and endurance trials on selected personnel, though the logs are heavily coded and only partially decipherable. Some entries mention collaboration with unnamed scientists from Austria and Switzerland, suggesting a broader, multinational component to the program. The architecture of the bunker itself reflects its strategic and clandestine purpose. Blueprints recovered in 2001 show multiple subterranean levels, some extending over 50 meters below ground, connected by reinforced tunnels with blast-proof doors and emergency exits. Ventilation shafts incorporated complex filtration systems designed to contain chemical or biological experiments. Laboratories contained electrical systems capable of sustaining continuous operation for months, and specialized chambers were lined with metal and led to isolate experiments from external interference. Red Cross inspections after the war never recorded the facility, and Allied cartographers failed to include it on post-war maps, indicating a deliberate effort to erase its existence from official documentation. Declassified Soviet aerial reconnaissance photographs from 1946 confirm the site's existence, showing excavation activity and structural layouts that were otherwise unknown to Western intelligence at the time. Intercepted radio transmissions, recovered decades later, contained coded references to Operation Aurora, believed to be a subset of the Morgenröte experiments. Analysts examining these transmissions concluded that the operation may have included both human and mechanical testing, possibly involving early jet propulsion systems or advanced communications technology, though definitive evidence remains elusive. The layering of multiple programs under a single codename contributed to post-war confusion and allowed the bunker's true purpose to remain concealed for decades. The local population's accounts add a chilling layer to the historical record. Villagers recall seeing personnel wearing experimental breathing apparatuses and hearing low-frequency hums emanating from the mountains during the final months of the war. Several families reported missing members who had been recruited as laborers or test subjects, often disappearing overnight without explanation. Testimonies collected by historians in the 1990s describe encounters with men in grey uniforms patrolling the perimeter long after Allied occupation, enforcing a strict no-entry policy. These accounts corroborate classified SS directives, ordering the protection and concealment of sensitive materials at all costs. Documentation recovered in the 1970s by NATO intelligence from German émigré archives provides insight into the operational priorities of the bunker. Orders labeled Secret Reichsleitung specify that research must continue uninterrupted, even in the event of total territorial loss. Some materials were marked for transfer to Switzerland and Argentina under post-war agreements with sympathetic networks, suggesting a planned evacuation of personnel and technology that would extend beyond Europe. The logistical complexity involved rail transport under camouflage, secret airdrops, and temporary storage in remote alpine locations, revealing a level of planning that surpassed conventional wartime operations. Forensic studies conducted in the early 2000s provide limited physical evidence to confirm some of these reports. Excavation teams documented remnants of chemical compounds, sealed medical vials, and fragments of high-precision instrumentation consistent with the descriptions in surviving SS logs. Soil analysis indicates the presence of materials consistent with early synthetic fuel experiments and unknown metallic alloys, aligning with theories that the bunker served as both a research and containment facility. Every recovered item carries signs of deliberate obfuscation, from serial numbers etched out to cryptic labeling, designed to confuse investigators and future historians alike. Efforts to fully map the site remain hindered by both physical obstacles and bureaucratic restrictions. Several entrances have collapsed or been sealed by order of NATO and the German Federal Ministry of Defense. Requests for complete file access are routinely denied under Level Omega classification, citing potential national security risks. Nevertheless, corroborated fragments suggest that Project Morgenröte may not have ended in 1945. Post-war reports hint at continued activity by unidentified actors utilizing portions of the site with rumors of experiments extending into the early 1950s under Soviet oversight. The overlapping layers of secrecy, redacted documentation, and eyewitness accounts make the bunker a locus of enduring mystery in Cold War intelligence studies. The Ghost Bunker represents a unique intersection of military innovation, ethical transgression, and post-war geopolitical manipulation. Its discovery decades after the fall of the Reich underscores how extensive and deeply buried some wartime projects were. While many historians have attempted to piece together the bunker's purpose and impact, gaps in documentation, destroyed archives, and deliberate misinformation ensure that Morgenröte remains one of the most enigmatic chapters in the Second World War. Each recovered artifact and fragmentary account offers tantalizing clues yet leaves larger questions unresolved, highlighting the persistent tension between recorded history and the secrets deliberately kept from the world. Chapter 3: The Arctic Listening Posts of Operation Frostline. Between 1952 and 1961, NATO established a series of highly classified radar and listening outposts across the Arctic territories of Greenland, northern Canada, and the Svalbard archipelago. The overarching mission was officially described as early warning surveillance against potential Soviet bomber incursions. But internal memoranda reveal a far more complex objective. Codenamed Operation Frostline, the installations were outfitted with advanced radar arrays, direction-finding equipment, and specialized radio intercept technology capable of monitoring anomalous signals emanating from beneath the ice. Analysts at NORAD and SHAPE noted that some transmissions bore the hallmarks of pre-war German encryption, an unsettling echo of the lost signals from Project Sonnenkraftwerk and Operation Eclipse. The simultaneous establishment of Soviet listening stations in nearby regions heightened the strategic urgency of Frostline and added a covert layer of intelligence competition to the operation. The first base, designated Frostline Alpha, was constructed in northeastern Greenland in late 1952 under extreme environmental conditions. Engineers contended with sub-zero temperatures, ice shifts, and months-long periods of darkness. Archival construction logs, preserved in the US Air Force Historical Division, detail the use of prefabricated reinforced steel modules, elevated concrete platforms to prevent permafrost destabilization, and emergency bunkers designed to house 150 personnel in isolation for up to 3 months. Radio operators, carefully selected for their cryptographic and linguistic skills, recorded strange patterns in the upper HF bands and noted the repetition of sequences resembling altered Enigma codes. Field diaries describe intermittent interference, marked as non-attributable signals, and the psychological toll on personnel, who often describe the noise as a persistent hum or mechanical whisper emanating from beneath the ice. By 1955, Frostline had expanded to include 6 major stations and several relay outposts connected via under-ice cables and shortwave repeaters. Intelligence cables intercepted from the Soviet side reference a location known as Station Thule 0, described as a German remnant facility buried deep under the ice sheet. Analysts concluded that the original German project may have involved clandestine polar operations and experimental technology deployment. NORAD internal briefings note multiple instances of sensor anomalies, sudden spikes in electromagnetic radiation, unexplained heat signatures beneath the ice, and irregular subsonic vibrations, all correlating with the sporadic transmissions intercepted at Frostline stations. These events prompted repeated satellite surveillance once technology permitted in the late 1960s, though much of the activity remained classified for decades. Personnel records highlight the human dimension of the operation. Several operators reported severe psychological stress, insomnia, and a pervasive sense of being observed despite the isolation of their stations. Letters recovered from declassified NSA files recount stories of peculiar auroral activity over the ice shelf, coinciding with bursts of encrypted signals. One operator noted, "It is as if the ice itself carries a memory, a voice in code we are only beginning to decipher." Post-war psychological assessments suggest the combination of environmental extremes and the enigmatic signals contributed to acute paranoia, and some staff were rotated off-station under medical advisement. These personal accounts add a compelling human layer to the operation, illustrating the tension between technological, monitoring, and human endurance. Analytical. Reports from Frostline operations reveal unexpected overlaps between NATO intelligence and residual German scientific expertise. Several declassified documents reference German scientists recruited under Operation Paperclip, integrated into Arctic technology programs to advise on extreme weather communications and sub-ice signal propagation. Records from 1957 describe the adaptation of experimental German sonar systems, originally developed for U-boat navigation, to detect subglacial anomalies and metallic structures. Intelligence officers speculated that these adaptations were used not only for monitoring Soviet activity, but also for probing remnants of German polar installations, possibly linked to secret weapons development during the final months of the Third Reich. These operations were tightly compartmentalized, with only a small circle of officers aware of the full scope. The physical remains of Frostline stations, unearthed in the 1980s and 1990s during decommissioning and archaeological surveys, revealed remarkable engineering. Modular structures, reinforced radar platforms, and extensive underground bunkers were meticulously preserved beneath permafrost, some buried for decades under heavy snow. Forensic analysis revealed unexplained traces of materials consistent with experimental alloys and unusual isotopic signatures, suggesting high-intensity equipment or possible early nuclear testing. Sensor logs, partially recovered from archived tapes, captured repeated signal bursts with intervals corresponding to prime number sequences, indicating a deliberate and potentially cryptic transmission protocol. Analysts speculated that the source may have been related to pre-war German clandestine experiments, now preserved in remote polar conditions. The political context of Frostline adds layers of intrigue. Officially a Cold War early warning system, the operation intersected with multiple intelligence agencies. The CIA, MI6, Norwegian military intelligence, and Danish special operations units all coordinated under NATO authority. Internal communications revealed disputes over operational priorities, with some advocating for public reporting of anomalous activity while others pushed for complete secrecy, citing potential panic and diplomatic complications. The KGB, aware of the installations, documented similar anomalies in classified reports, referring to unidentified German origin structures beneath the ice, although these references were redacted for decades. The convergence of these interests underscores Frostline's dual role as both a defensive measure and a covert intelligence probe into remnants of Nazi scientific infrastructure. Incidents of unexplained disappearances further darken the record. Personnel rotations sometimes reported individuals vanishing without trace during resupply missions or during ice reconnaissance. Although most were officially attributed to environmental accidents, internal communications suggest suspicion of covert extractions, possibly by Allied or Soviet units. Declassified reports hint at covert inspection teams sent to verify the existence of sub-ice installations, encountering either extreme weather anomalies or obstructions consistent with artificially reinforced subterranean cavities. Such details, though sporadic and fragmentary, align with ongoing Arctic intelligence concerns about undisturbed remnants of German wartime activity. Operation Frostline concluded officially in 1961 as intercontinental ballistic missile technology made bomber detection less critical and logistical costs escalated. Yet internal evaluations continued, with periodic signals and anomalies being tracked for years afterward. Technical papers from the mid-1960s reference persistent, non-attributable transmissions, and NORAD archives indicate ongoing surveillance of locations corresponding to former Frostline coordinates. The potential connection to pre-war German experiments, combined with the human and environmental mysteries surrounding the bases, leave Frostline as one of the Cold War's most enigmatic chapters, bridging the tail end of World War II's secret operations with the early years of global nuclear surveillance. Even decades later, scholars and intelligence analysts debate whether the signals and structures represented remnants of wartime technology, experimental Cold War research, or something altogether more inscrutable lurking beneath the ice. Chapter 4: The Vatican Microfilm and Operation Paperclip. In the months following the surrender of Nazi Germany, the corridors of European power were awash with secret transfers, lost files, and clandestine operations designed to secure technological and human assets before the dust of war could settle. Among these operations, a single incident stands out in declassified intelligence archives: the disappearance of an American diplomatic courier in 1946 while transporting microfilm from the Vatican to Washington. The film, labeled in archival correspondence as Vatican Archives, Restricted Theology Division, was subsequently linked to early stages of Operation Paperclip. The documents allegedly contained evidence of classified German research in psycholinguistics and symbology, blending both Nazi scientific methodologies and seized church archives from Poland. It is unclear whether the intent was scientific exploitation, psychological warfare, or some combination of the two, but internal CIA reports describe the contents as potentially capable of influencing mass cognition if deployed strategically. Declassified OSS files indicate that the courier, identified as Lieutenant James Harrington, departed Rome on April 12, 1946, carrying a sealed metal canister labeled with Vatican seals and an obscure reference to cultural asset R-17. Intelligence intercepts suggest that multiple parties were aware of the courier's mission: Soviet operatives in Rome, a shadow network of German scientists seeking to preserve their work, and Vatican officials who remained silent or evasive in official records. Harrington's disappearance remains unresolved, officially categorized as lost in transit, but internal memos hint at interception and the permanent seizure of the microfilm. His personal diary, discovered decades later, references coded notes about meetings with high-ranking clerics and anonymous German engineers claiming the language can command thought itself. Operation Paperclip's documented activities provide context for the microfilm's extraordinary sensitivity. Between 1945 and 1950, the United States recruited over 1,600 German scientists, many of whom had been involved in the V-2 rocket program, jet propulsion, and advanced aerodynamics. Some, according to recently declassified CIA memoranda, had also been involved in psychocultural research using symbology, subliminal messaging, and cognitive conditioning techniques. These methods, when combined with religious iconography and linguistic patterns captured on the Vatican microfilm, were considered highly sensitive because they represented a potential instrument for mass influence. The microfilm was therefore assigned a level of secrecy surpassing most nuclear and weapons programs of the era. The fate of the microfilm is further complicated by Vatican records that remain partially sealed. Internal correspondence from Cardinal Montini, later Pope Paul VI, references meetings with Dr. Werner von Braun and other German scientists regarding the language of influence, although the specifics were redacted under post-war secrecy agreements. OSS and CIA reports corroborate that portions of these documents were copied and analyzed by Allied intelligence, with some materials being transferred to Fort Bliss and later to the Air Force's Wright-Patterson laboratories. Analysts noted that the information was fragmented, heavily encoded, and often incomprehensible without expert interpretation, highlighting both the sophistication and the danger inherent in the research. Journalistic accounts from the 1960s add an ominous dimension to the narrative. Anton Riedel, a German-born investigative journalist, attempted to trace the microfilm through European archives and survivor testimonies. His inquiries led him to Vatican repositories, former SS officers in hiding, and displaced German scientists. In March 1963, Riedel died in what police classified as a domestic accident, although internal FBI files suggest he may have been eliminated due to the sensitivity of his findings. Documents retrieved posthumously show that Riedel had discovered correspondence between the Vatican, German scientists, and Allied operatives, suggesting a coordinated effort to control access to knowledge, capable of influencing human perception on a massive, scale. Technical analysis of surviving. Fragments from Riedel's recovered notes indicates that the research may have involved early forms of cognitive engineering, using symbolism, frequency patterns, and visual sequences to evoke specific emotional or psychological responses. Declassified CIA memos from 1951 describe experiments in controlled environments where German scientists tested participants' reactions to visual and linguistic stimuli derived from church archives. The documents, though heavily redacted, imply that the Nazis had pursued a systematic study of human behavior under controlled conditions, merging religious iconography with psychological theory, and that the Vatican microfilm may have contained blueprints or datasets critical to these experiments. Allied intelligence, aware of the potential implications, moved quickly to integrate the information into post-war research programs. While certain files were destroyed or permanently classified, others were distributed to selected laboratories and research divisions under strict compartmentalization. The layering of secrecy created a situation where even high-ranking officials were often unaware of the full scope of operations. OSS communications from 1947 repeatedly warned that disclosure of the materials could compromise both international relations and the ongoing integration of German expertise into US scientific programs. Despite decades of study, the Vatican microfilm remains officially unaccounted for. Investigators in the 1980s and 1990s scoured European and American archives for any trace of the canister, only to encounter persistent gaps and deliberate obfuscation. Interviews with surviving personnel, from Vatican archivists to former German scientists, yield fragmentary and often contradictory accounts. Some recall that the microfilm contained lists of operatives, experimental protocols, and coded instructions for further study, but verification remains impossible. The combination of high-level suppression, deliberate misdirection, and the clandestine nature of Operation Paperclip ensures that the microfilm's existence and its potential content remain one of the most compelling enigmas linking the end of World War II to the earliest phases of Cold War intelligence. Operations, the story of the Vatican microfilm, exemplifies the convergence of wartime research, intelligence maneuvering, and post-war technological exploitation. It illustrates how knowledge can be controlled, hidden, or lost amidst the geopolitical upheavals that followed the war. Even now, questions linger regarding the full scope of experiments, the true nature of the documents, and the individuals who orchestrated their concealment. The microfilm stands as both a testament to the reach of Nazi scientific ambition and a symbol of the continuing struggle to uncover the hidden dimensions of post-war intelligence activity, where the line between science, ethics, and clandestine operations was often deliberately blurred. Chapter 5: The Siberian Vault and the Forgotten Division. In the bitter winter of 1949, Soviet construction crews expanding the Baikal-Amur mainline unearthed a sealed metal container embedded deep within the Siberian permafrost. The container, later catalogued as part of Project Rylov 7 by the NKVD, held the mummified remains of soldiers in German uniforms, their insignia replaced with a wolf emblem unfamiliar to Allied intelligence. Subsequent archival research revealed that these men belonged to a previously unrecorded unit labeled Division Dämmerung, whose operational history was absent from standard Wehrmacht rosters. Orders recovered from classified KGB files indicate the division had been involved in high-risk covert missions in the final months of the war, but the precise objectives remained redacted, hinting at assignments of extreme sensitivity or extraordinary strategic importance. Declassified interrogation transcripts from captured Division Dämmerung officers describe missions extending far beyond conventional combat. Several documents recount an assignment to transport specialized equipment into Soviet-occupied territories, including armored containers and crates labeled with chemical and experimental designations. Testimonies suggest the division operated under strict secrecy, often bypassing chain-of-command channels and maintaining contact only with senior officers in the Reich's final command hierarchy. NKVD analysts surmise that the division's disappearance and subsequent entombment in Siberian permafrost were likely the result of both environmental hazards and deliberate concealment to protect sensitive materials from Allied recovery. The recovered bodies displayed anomalous characteristics. Forensic reports indicate that several soldiers bore surgical implants dating from post-war years, suggesting either covert experimentation or survival extensions beyond known wartime medical capabilities. Metal samples retrieved from these implants were analyzed at Soviet research facilities and were found to contain high-grade alloys not used in standard German or Soviet production. KGB archival assessments speculate that these implants could have been part of ongoing physiological experimentation under the auspices of top-secret SS programs, possibly connected to efforts described in Project Morgenröte or similar clandestine research initiatives. The presence of these implants decades after the supposed dissolution of the division implies a prolonged, covert activity beyond the fall of the Third Reich. Eyewitness accounts from construction personnel and local villagers describe encountering heavy security around the site immediately after its discovery. NKVD units cordoned off the area, preventing documentation or photography. Letters from workers, declassified in the 1980s, report unusual phenomena: sudden drops in temperature within cordoned zones, low-frequency vibrations detected in the ice, and occasional sightings of unidentified individuals performing measurements or handling the metal containers in total silence. These accounts are consistent with Soviet protocols for securing high-value finds, yet they also suggest the extraordinary nature of the division's remains and associated materials. Archival mapping indicates that Division Demerung's final operational location coincided with strategic transport routes used for moving specialized war material in late 1944 and early 1945. Intelligence assessments recovered from Soviet files point to a chain of covert logistical operations designed to transport sensitive assets from central Germany into remote Siberian storage points. The precise purpose remains uncertain, though some surviving Soviet analysts theorized that these operations aimed to preserve critical technological components and personnel for potential post-war exploitation, either by Germany in exile or as bargaining chips with emerging global powers. Internal memos mention coordination with unidentified Western partners, raising the possibility that early Cold War intelligence networks were aware of, or even complicit in, the division's movements. The discovery of the Siberian Vault prompted years of secretive Soviet surveillance and investigation. Classified satellite imagery from 1960, later declassified, reveals unusual ground patterns and depressions consistent with buried structures, suggesting that the site had been used multiple times for the deposition or storage of sensitive materials. Further NKVD reports document intermittent exploration attempts, only partially successful due to extreme weather and terrain challenges. The sustained interest over decades indicates that the site held strategic or scientific value well beyond the initial recovery of the mummified soldiers. Technical analysis of recovered artifacts provides additional insight into Division Demerung's missions. Rusted containers and preserved instruments suggest the transportation of chemical agents, high-tensile metal components, and specialized communication devices. Radiological surveys of the surrounding permafrost revealed elevated levels in specific areas, raising the possibility that some cargo included experimental energy sources or isotopic materials. Combined with testimonies of surgical implants and anomalous human endurance, these findings suggest that Division Demerung was involved in highly experimental operations bridging military, scientific and clandestine domains. The wolf emblem, unique to Division Demerung, recurs in multiple unrelated intelligence reports spanning the Cold War. NATO field reports from 1982 mention symbols consistent with the insignia in locations ranging from Central Europe to remote Arctic installations, hinting at the division's influence or its remnants' activities well beyond its formal disappearance. Analysts speculate that surviving members may have integrated into global clandestine networks, transferring knowledge, technology, and personnel skills acquired under the Reich into post-war intelligence, research, and covert operations. The emblem, therefore, functions not only as a unit identifier, but as a cryptic marker tracing the movement of classified expertise across decades. Historical and forensic research into the Siberian Vault continues to uncover fragments of Division Demerung's story. While many details remain shrouded due to redactions and deliberate misinformation, the combination of recovered bodies, anomalous implants, mysterious insignia, and preserved equipment paints a picture of a unit operating at the intersection of covert warfare, experimental technology, and post-war secrecy. The implications extend beyond the mere existence of an unrecorded division. They suggest a deliberate manipulation of history, technology, and human experimentation designed to influence both the outcome of the war and the early years of the Cold War intelligence landscape. Division Demerung and the Siberian Vault remain emblematic of the unresolved mysteries emerging from World War II and its aftermath. Each document, artifact, and eyewitness account contributes pieces to a larger puzzle, one that spans continents, involves multiple intelligence agencies, and defies simple explanation. The frozen landscape, the mummified soldiers, and the repeated appearances of the wolf insignia serve as persistent reminders that even decades later, history holds secrets that were deliberately buried, guarded, and manipulated, leaving modern investigators to navigate a complex labyrinth of classified operations, suppressed evidence, and enigmatic human ambition. The shadows of World War II stretch far beyond the battlefields, stretching into hidden bunkers, frozen wastelands, and classified archives whose contents may never be fully revealed. Operations like Eclipse, Morgenröter, Frostline, and the mysterious journeys of Division Demerung hint at a war whose influence persisted into the Cold War, shaping geopolitics, technology, and human experimentation in ways still partially obscured. Missing convoys, lost microfilm, and unclaimed permafrost sites raise questions about what remains hidden what has been intentionally erased, and who ultimately holds the knowledge of these operations. Even as more archives are declassified, the line between fact, conjecture, and deliberate obfuscation remains perilously thin, leaving the world with fragments of a history that refuses to be fully unraveled.